The emergency alert woke Minho Park at 3 in the morning. He stumbled out of bed in his quarters on Council Prime Station, his heart already racing before his mind fully understood why. The red light flashing on his communication panel meant only one thing. Something terrible had happened to human colonists. He pressed his hand against the scanner, and the message played. The face of Captain Hunji Lee appeared on the screen. Her expression was blank, but Minho could see the rage burning behind her eyes. She spoke in a flat, controlled voice that somehow made the words worse. Ambassador Park. At 0400 station time yesterday. Valtek's warships entered the new Sol system without warning. They attacked the colony with orbital bombardment. 20,000 civilians are dead. Another 5,000 are injured. The Valtek's fleet commander broadcast a message claiming we violated territorial boundaries by mining asteroids in their space. The asteroids in question were explicitly granted to humanity in the Treaty of First Contact, Section 12, Paragraph 6. I am transmitting all evidence to your secure channel. The colony governor requests immediate council intervention. The message ended. Minho sat in the darkness of his quarters for exactly 30 seconds, allowing himself that brief moment of grief and fury. Then he stood up, put on his formal ambassador robes, and walked toward the council chamber. By the time he arrived, he had buried every emotion behind the professional mask he had worn for 15 years of diplomatic service. The council chamber was a massive sphere floating in the center of the station. Representatives from 12 elder races occupied positions around the curved space, held in place by anti-gravity fields. At the center floated Council Speaker Thalanvor, a being of glowing gas contained within a crystalline sphere. The speaker's light pulsed in patterns that served as communication for his species Minho, activated his own gravity field, and rose to the speaking position. He waited for the translation systems to acknowledge his presence, then began speaking. His voice was calm, clear, and carried to every corner of the chamber. Honored council members, 23 hours ago, ships of the Valtek's Dominion attacked the human colony of New Sol without provocation or warning. 20,000 of my people are dead. This was not a border skirmish. This was not a misunderstanding. This was deliberate mass murder of civilians. I am formally requesting that this council take immediate action against the Valtek's Dominion for this war crime. The chamber erupted in the chaos of 12 different species, all trying to speak at once. Minho waited. He had expected this. The council never moved quickly on anything, especially not when it involved one of the powerful member races. War Chief Grathix of the Valtek's Dominion rose in his field. He was massive, nearly 3 meters tall, covered in thick scales that had evolved to deflect plasma weapons. His voice was a deep rumble that the translators rendered as contemptuous laughter. The humans mine in our territory despite warnings. They ignore our rightful claims. They showed disrespect to elder races who ruled this galaxy while their ancestors still lived in caves. We defended our sovereign space. This is our right under council law. If humans died, it is because they refused to leave when ordered. Minho pulled up the holographic display and projected it for the entire council to see. Star charts appeared, marked with colored boundaries and dated signatures. He highlighted the disputed region. These asteroids were granted to humanity 73 years ago when we joined the council. Every member here signed the treaty. The Valtek signature's right here. War Chief Grathix himself signed this document 30 years ago when he took his position. There is no legitimate territorial claim. There was no warning. The Valtek's attack violated 3 separate council laws regarding civilian protection, territorial sovereignty, and armed conflict protocols. Council Speaker Thalanver's light pulsed in the pattern that meant consideration. The other council members whispered among themselves. Minho waited. Hope and dread balanced on a knife edge inside his chest. Finally, the speaker's voice emerged from the translation system. The council acknowledges the human ambassador's concerns. We will issue a formal warning to the Valtek's Dominion. We recommend that human colonists evacuate the disputed region until a full territorial review can be conducted. This will ensure their safety while we investigate the situation thoroughly. Minho felt something cold settle into his stomach. He looked around the chamber at the faces of the elder races. Some looked uncomfortable. Some looked indifferent. None looked outraged. None looked like they would actually do anything to help. Formal warning, he repeated slowly. 20,000 of my people are dead, and the council response is a formal warning and a suggestion that the survivors abandon their homes. Ambassador Park, you must understand, the speaker said, and now there was something condescending in the translated tone. The Valtex Dominion is a powerful member of this council. They have maintained order in 3 sectors for over 1,000 years. Humanity is still very new to galactic politics. Perhaps if you had consulted with more experienced species before establishing colonies in contested regions, this tragedy could have been avoided. War Chief Grathix laughed again. The humans are weak. They have slow ships and primitive weapons. They should be grateful we only destroyed 1 small colony. If they continue to show disrespect, we will show them what real power looks like. Perhaps we will visit their homeworld next and teach them proper manners. The other council members did not laugh with him, but neither did they condemn his words. That silence told Minho everything he needed to know about how the galaxy truly viewed humanity. He bowed formally to the council and left the chamber. He returned to his quarters and immediately opened a secure channel to Earth. President Una Choi appeared on the screen within seconds. Behind her, Minho could see Admiral Taijin Kim, the Supreme Commander of the United Earth Defense Force. They did nothing, Minho said without preamble. The Council will not help us. They view us as too weak and too new to matter. The Valtex threatened Earth itself, and no one said a word against it. President Choi's expression did not change, but something shifted in her eyes. She glanced at Admiral Kim, and some unspoken communication passed between them. When she looked back at the camera, Minho saw a decision had been made. Thank you, Ambassador Park. Please return to Earth immediately. We will be making an announcement within the week. 5 days later, President Una Choi stood before the combined assembly of Earth's government. The speech was broadcast to every human colony, every human ship, and through official channels to the Galactic Council. She spoke for exactly 7 minutes. She detailed the attack on New Sol. She described the Council's response. She listed every treaty violation, every ignored law, every dismissed complaint humanity had brought before the Council in 73 years of membership. And then she made the announcement that would change the galaxy forever. Effective immediately, humanity withdraws from the Galactic Council. We no longer recognize the authority of an organization that allows mass murder of civilians without consequence. Furthermore, humanity formally declares a state of war with the Valtex Dominion. We will have justice for New Sol, and we will show the galaxy that there are still species who remember what honor means. The galaxy received the declaration with laughter. Humanity, the weakest member species, declaring war on one of the Council's military powers. It was seen as suicide. It was seen as the tantrum of a child who did not understand how the galaxy truly worked. What the galaxy did not know, what the Council had never suspected, was that humanity had been preparing for this moment since the day they first left Earth and saw how the galaxy really operated. They had studied. They had built. They had waited. Now the waiting was over, War Chief. Grathix stood on the command deck of his flagship and watched the tactical display with satisfaction. 500 Valtex warships gathered around the fortress world of Krathener. It was the largest battle fleet assembled in 3 centuries. Every ship was battle-tested, every crew was experienced, and every weapon system was the finest technology the Valtex, the military, could produce. The War Chief opened a communication channel that broadcast across every frequency known to galactic civilization. He wanted everyone to hear what he was about to say. Humans, you have made the mistake of challenging the Valtex Dominion. Your declaration of war is the foolish act of a species that does not understand power. I am bringing 500 warships to your homeworld. Earth will burn. Your cities will be reduced to ash. Your people will be scattered across the stars as a warning to anyone else who thinks they can disrespect the elder races. You have 72 hours to surrender unconditionally. If you do not, your species will cease to exist. He ended the transmission and smiled. His teeth were designed for tearing flesh, and the expression would terrify any species that saw it. The other council races would see this broadcast. They would understand that the Vaultek's dominion enforced respect through strength. Any species that challenged them would be crushed. The expected response from Earth did not come. No plea for mercy. No desperate attempt at negotiation. No frantic calls to the council begging for intervention. Just silence. Days passed. Then weeks. The entire Sol system went dark. No ships left human space. No communications were answered. Even the civilian trading vessels that usually traveled between human colonies simply vanished from the galactic network. It was as if humanity had decided to hide and wait for death to arrive. The council races watched with morbid curiosity. Some felt pity for the doomed humans. Some felt contempt for their weakness. Several placed bets on how quickly humanity would surrender once Grathic's S-fleet arrived in their system. No one expected the humans to actually fight. What the galaxy could not see was happening in the darkness beyond Neptune. Captain Hyunji Lee stood on the bridge of the UEDS Inchin and watched as the final ships of Shadow Fleet Sigma completed their assembly. 15 dreadnoughts, each one the size of a small city. 40 cruisers built for speed and precision. 80 destroyers designed to hunt capital ships. And 200 support vessels carrying enough ammunition and supplies to fight for months without resupply. She had been preparing for this moment for 8 years. She knew every member of her crew of 1,500. Weapons officer Jiwon Nam had scored perfect marks in every combat simulation. Tactical analyst So-min Kwon could predict enemy movements with frightening accuracy. Chief engineer Daeon Cho had personally modified the Incheon's reactor to produce 30% more power than design specifications said was possible. Admiral Taijin. Kim's face appeared on her command screen. He looked tired, but determined. Captain Lee. Shadow Fleet Sigma is authorized to proceed with Operation Thunderfall. Your target is Krathener. Disable their orbital defenses and occupy the fortress world. Show them what happens when they threaten Earth. Show the galaxy what humans can do when we stop being polite. Hyunji saluted. Understood, sir. We'll make them remember New Sol. The fleet activated their faster-than-light drives and vanished from human space. They reappeared 3 days later, not at the edge of the Krathener system, where the Vaultek's expected any attack to arrive, but directly inside the orbital defense perimeter. It was a maneuver that should have been impossible. Every species in the galaxy believed that FTL jumps near massive gravity wells would tear a ship apart. Humanity had spent 70 years studying that assumption and had discovered it was wrong. Jump drives could function near planets. They just required modifications that violated every standard safety protocol in the Galactic Engineering Handbook. Humans had decided that surprise was worth the risk. The Vaultek's defenders scrambled to respond. But they were facing the wrong direction. Their weapons were positioned to target threats coming from outside the system. Suddenly having an entire human fleet appear behind their lines created chaos in their formations. Hyunji gave the order to fire, and the Inchin's weapons unleashed hell. Railguns accelerated tungsten rods to a fraction of light speed. The kinetic projectiles hit Vaultek's shields designed to deflect energy weapons and simply punched through them like they were made of paper. Vaultek ships that had survived plasma bombardments for decades crumpled under impacts that released energy equivalent to nuclear weapons. Nuclear-pumped. X-ray lasers cut through armor plating. The lasers were a human invention, weapons that the Council engineers had said were theoretically possible, but impractical to build. Humans had built them anyway and discovered they were extremely practical against shields calibrated for plasma weapons. The Vaultek's returned fire, but their plasma cannons were designed for long-range bombardment. At close range, human point defense systems could track and destroy the relatively slow-moving plasma bolts before they reached their targets. The few that got through hit armor designed specifically to dissipate thermal energy. G1. Nam coordinated the weapons systems with the precision of a surgeon. She identified the Vaultek's command ships and prioritized them as targets. Destroying the fleet's leadership would break their coordination. Within the first hour, 3 Vaultex admirals were dead, and their command networks were collapsing into confusion. Salmon. Quan tracked every enemy movement and predicted their responses. She had studied 70 years of Vaultex battle records. She knew their doctrine, their tactics, and their preferred formations. Every time the Vaultex tried to regroup, she anticipated it and directed fire to break up their attempts at coordination. Daeon Cho kept the Inchin running at 120% of normal capacity. Every time an enemy shot got through the point defenses and damaged a system, his engineering teams had it repaired within minutes. The ship was taking damage but remained combat effective through sheer determination and skill. The battle lasted for hours. When it ended, 300 Vaultex warships were destroyed or disabled. Krathener's orbital defenses were reduced to floating debris. The Fortress World's ground-based shields were down. Human marines were preparing to land. Shadow Fleet Sigma had lost 47 ships. 4,000 humans were dead. But they had achieved a victory that the galaxy would have said was impossible. War Chief Graheth survived. His flagship was disabled but intact. Human boarding teams captured him and brought him to Captain Lee. He stood before her in restraints, his scales scarred from plasma burns, his expression a mixture of rage and disbelief. "This is impossible," he said. "Your weapons are primitive. Your ships are slow. Your species has been in space for barely a century. How did you do this?" Hyunji looked at him with cold eyes. "We've studied you. For 70 years we watched how you fight. We analyzed your tactics, your weapons, your doctrine. Then we built specifically to counter everything you do. You thought we were weak because we didn't show you our true capabilities. That was your mistake." She gestured to the view screen showing Krathener below. "You attacked New Sol because you thought we couldn't respond. You threatened Earth because you thought we would be too afraid to fight back. You told the galaxy you would burn our homeworld because you believed your own propaganda about being superior to younger species." She leaned forward, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "We are not superior to you because we are stronger. We are superior because we know that strength must be earned through preparation, not proclaimed through threats. You will be tried for war crimes. Your forces will surrender, and the galaxy will learn that humanity does not make threats. We make promises." The news of the Battle of Krathener reached the Galactic Council within hours. The emergency session was chaos. Representatives shouted over each other in a dozen different languages. The translation systems struggled to keep up with the flood of shocked exclamations. How had humans developed such advanced weapons? How had they hidden entire fleets from Council observation? How had a species that joined the galactic community 70 years ago defeated a military power that had dominated 3 sectors for millennia? Council Speaker Thalenver called for order, but it took nearly an hour before the chamber quieted enough for anyone to speak coherently. When silence finally fell, the speaker's light pulsed in a pattern that indicated deep concern. "The humans have demonstrated capabilities far beyond our assessment. We must reconsider our understanding of this species. They are clearly more dangerous than we believed." In the back of the chamber, historian Sun Wuhan sat quietly and thought about the human historical records he had been studying. He was beginning to understand something that the rest of the council had missed, something that would change everything. The emergency council session continued for 3 days. Representatives argued in circles while trying to understand what humanity's victory meant for the galactic order. The debate eventually crystallized into 3 distinct factions, each with its own view of how to respond to the human threat. The first faction, led by Council Speaker Thalenver and the Ethereal Collective, believed humanity must be stopped immediately. They argued that a species capable of hiding such advanced weapons and defeating the Vaultex so decisively could not be allowed to continue unchecked. They proposed assembling a combined council fleet to force human surrender before the war escalated further. 23 member races voted to support this position. The second faction, championed by Queen Hannah of the Insectoid Hive Confederation, took a different view. She pointed out that humanity had legitimate grievances. The Vaultex had murdered 20,000 civilians. The Council had done nothing. Humanity's military response, while shocking, was technically justified under council law regarding self-defense. She suggested opening negotiations and addressing the underlying issues that had led to conflict. 17 member races supported this approach. The third faction said nothing at all. They represented races that had their own territorial disputes with the Vaultecs or other powerful council members. They watched the debate with quiet interest, calculating what humanity's victory meant for their own situations. If humans could successfully challenge one of the council's military powers, perhaps the old order was not as permanent as everyone believed. While the council argued, Ambassador Minho Park broadcast humanity's formal demands. The transmission was sent to every council member, every news network, and every public communication channel in the galaxy. He spoke calmly, presenting each demand as a simple statement of fact. The Vaultex Dominion will surrender all territorial claims to the new Sol system and surrounding regions. They will pay reparations to the families of the 20,000 civilians murdered in their unprovoked attack. Their military leadership will submit to war crimes trials conducted by neutral parties. Additionally, humanity demands that the Galactic Council Charter be rewritten to include explicit protections against military aggression towards civilian populations. These terms are not negotiable. The galaxy reacted to the demands with mixed feelings. Some thought they were reasonable. Others thought humanity was overreaching. But everyone noticed one critical detail. The demands were not the ravings of a species drunk on its first military victory. They were carefully calculated political goals designed to establish precedents and protections. Humanity was not acting out of rage. They were executing a strategic plan. On the Council Library world of Arkiva, historian Sun Wuhan made a discovery that would change the entire debate. He had been assigned to research humanity's pre-contact history to understand how such a young species had developed such effective military capabilities. What he found disturbed him deeply. He pulled up human historical records spanning 10,000 years. The data showed an unbroken chain of warfare. Small, tribal conflicts. Regional wars. Continental wars. Global wars. Wars over resources, ideology, territory, religion, and pride. The pattern repeated endlessly throughout human history. Other species had periods of war followed by long eras of peace. Humanity had never stopped fighting. Sun Wu dug deeper. He analyzed the progression of human weapons technology. Spears gave way to bows. Bows gave way to firearms. Firearms gave way to missiles. Missiles gave way to nuclear weapons. And at each stage, humans developed not just weapons, but entire systems of doctrine, tactics, and strategy. They studied their own failures and learned from them. They created military academies, war colleges, and strategic think tanks. They made warfare into a science. He found something else too. Humans had rules for warfare. Even in their most brutal conflicts, most human cultures developed codes of conduct. Rules about treating prisoners. Rules about protecting civilians. Rules about proportional response. The rules were often broken, but the fact that they existed at all suggested something important. Humans understood that war without limits would destroy civilization itself. Sun Wu compiled his findings into a report and presented it to the full council. He stood in the center of the chamber, projecting historical images and data while he spoke. The council members watched in growing unease as the scope of human warfare became clear. Honored council members, we have made a critical error in assessing humanity. We assumed they were weak because their technology seemed primitive. We assumed they were naive because they were new to the galactic stage. Both assumptions were wrong. He highlighted a timeline showing major human conflicts. Humans have been at war continuously for their entire recorded history. The longest period of general peace they achieved was 65 years, and even that included multiple regional conflicts. Every generation of humans has combat experience. Every human culture has warfare embedded in its history and thinking. He pulled up technical specifications of human weapons. They did not bring their best weapons when they joined the council. They brought export-grade equipment designed for showing potential threats. Their actual military capabilities are generations beyond what we observed. They studied our weapons, our shields, our tactics. They built everything specifically to counter Council technology. They did not build weapons based on what was theoretically possible. They built weapons based on what would actually work in combat, Council member from the Crystalline Concordat interrupted. But surely they cannot match species with thousands of years more technological development. That is precisely the mistake we keep making. Technological sophistication does not equal tactical effectiveness. Human weapons are not the most advanced in the galaxy. They are the most practical. Every human weapons system exists because they tested it in actual combat conditions and refined it based on real-world results. They have 10,000 years of accumulated battlefield experience. We have theories and simulations. He projected one final image. It was a human military academy, showing young soldiers training in combat techniques. We asked ourselves how humans could defeat the Vaultex. We should have been asking a different question. How could the Vaultex possibly defeat a species that has never stopped fighting since they became sentient? The chamber fell silent. The implications were slowly sinking in. Humanity was not dangerous because they were strong. They were dangerous because they were experienced. That same day, Vaultex Dominion made a decision that would prove to be their final mistake. Desperate and humiliated by their defeat at Krathaner, they decided to show the galaxy that they were still a force to be feared. If they could not defeat human military forces, they would strike at softer targets. Vaultex Special Forces teams infiltrated the human colony of Nova Terra. They released a biological weapon into the atmosphere. The virus was designed to be highly contagious and extremely lethal. It spread through the colony in hours. 8,000 civilians died before human. Medical teams could even identify what was killing them. The attack was broadcast across the galaxy as a warning. The message was clear. Submit to Vaultex power, or watch your people die in agony. President Unichoi's response was transmitted 12 hours after the attack. She appeared on screens across human space, and by extension, across the galaxy. Her expression was controlled, but everyone who saw her broadcast felt a chill run down their spine. Her words were simple and direct. Vaultex Dominion has chosen to use biological weapons against civilian populations. This is a violation of every law of civilized warfare. It is an act that removes any possibility of negotiated peace. To the Vaultex leadership, I say this: you should not have done that. You will now learn why humans created rules for warfare. Not to protect ourselves, to protect our enemies from us. The transmission ended. What followed would be remembered as the darkest month in galactic history. Human ships began appearing throughout Vaultex territory. Not military targets this time. They struck at infrastructure. Power generation facilities, water processing plants, communication networks, transportation hubs. Nothing that would directly kill civilians, but everything that made modern civilization function. Within days, Vaultex worlds were struggling to maintain basic services. Then human special forces teams began their own operations. They did not attack civilians. They hunted the specific Vaultex commanders who had ordered the biological weapon attack. One by one, these commanders disappeared. Some were found later, delivered to New Sol for trial. Others simply vanished and were never seen again. The galaxy watched in horror. As humanity demonstrated what total war actually meant, the Vaultex military tried to respond but found themselves always one step behind. Human tactics were unpredictable because they had no standard doctrine. They adapted to each situation. Using whatever methods would be most effective, Council Speaker Thalenver called another emergency session. The debate was no longer about whether to stop humanity. Now it was about whether anyone could actually stop them if they tried. Admiral Taijin Kim made a public broadcast. His message was directed at both the Vaultex and the Council. We are winning this war. But this is not the outcome we wanted. We wanted justice through law. You forced us to seek justice through force. The responsibility for every death in this conflict lies with those who chose violence over civilization. We will continue until the Vaultex surrender, or until they are no longer capable of threatening any species ever again. The choice is theirs. The war had entered a new phase. and the galaxy was beginning to realize that humanity was not going to stop until they achieved their objectives. Regardless of what the Council wanted, the human response to the biological attack on Nova Terra was swift and absolute. Every reserve unit was activated. Every shipyard switched to 24-hour production schedules. Civilian factories retooled to produce military equipment. Within 72 hours, Earth's entire economy had shifted to total war footing. But the truly terrifying change was not in production numbers or fleet sizes. It was in the demeanor of humans themselves. The galaxy had grown accustomed to seeing humans as friendly, curious, eager to trade and share knowledge. Now they saw something different. Human diplomats became cold and formal. Human traders stopped visiting non-essential ports. Human scientists withdrew from collaborative projects. It was as if a switch had been flipped, transforming an entire species from potential friends into implacable enemies. Captain Borum, Shin commanded a special operations team called Reaper Squad. Their mission was simple in concept, but extremely dangerous in execution. They would infiltrate deep into Vaultek's territory and capture the 3 generals who had ordered the biological attack on Nova Terra. These targets were not on the front lines. They were behind layers of security on the most heavily defended worlds in the Vaultek's dominion. Borum's team consisted of 12 operators, one a specialist in their field. They spent 2 weeks just planning the operation, studying every detail of Vaultek security procedures, facility layouts, and guard rotations. When they finally launched, they used a combination of technologies that the Council did not know humans possessed. Stealth coding that bent light around their ships, making them effectively invisible to standard sensors. Quantum communicators that could not be intercepted or jammed. Genetic modulators that allowed them to temporarily alter their appearance to mimic other species. The Council races thought they understood human technology. Reaper Squad demonstrated how wrong that assumption was. They hit the first target on Drexel Prime. It's the administrative capital of the Vaultek's dominion. General Krathvon commanded from a fortress that had never been breached in 800 years. Reaper Squad was inside and out with their target in 17 minutes. By the time alarms started sounding, they were already off-world. The second target was on a space station orbiting Vaultek's Prime itself. Admiral Droken believed he was safe surrounded by the home fleet. Borum's team infiltrated the station disguised as maintenance workers, grabbed the Admiral during his evening meal, and escaped using an emergency airlock. The home fleet never even detected their presence. The third target took longer. General Zalvex had gone into hiding after learning about the first 2 captures. He moved between safe houses, never staying in one location for more than a few hours. Borum tracked him for 5 days before finally cornering him in an underground bunker on a minor colony world. The general fought back, forcing Reaper Squad to stun him. They extracted him and delivered him to Nu, Sol along with the other 2. The trials were held in a makeshift courtroom built on the ruins of the original colony. The survivors of Nova Terra served as both witnesses and jury. The proceedings were broadcast across the galaxy. Every species watched as humans methodically presented evidence, gave the accused opportunities to defend themselves, and then rendered judgment based on established laws of war. All 3 Vaultek's commanders were found guilty. The sentences were carried out within 24 hours. The galaxy reacted with mixed emotions. Some species were horrified by the speed of human justice. Others noted that the humans had at least held trials. The Vaulteks had simply murdered civilians without even that courtesy, while special operations teams were hunting war criminals. Admiral Taijin Kim was preparing the largest military operation in human history. Every combat-ready ship from every human fleet converged on a single target, Vaultek's Prime, the throne world of the Dominion. Over 800 human warships assembled in the darkness beyond the system's edge. The Vaulteks. Defenders prepared for the inevitable assault. They had 300 ships defending the homeworld, plus extensive orbital platforms and planetary shields. They knew they were outnumbered, but they believed they could hold long enough for reinforcements to arrive from other Vaultek's territories. The human fleet arrived and did something no one expected. They did not attack. They simply formed a perfect blockade around the entire system. Every jump point was covered. Every approach vector was monitored. No ships could enter. No ships could leave. No communication signals could escape. Valtex Prime was completely cut off from the rest of the galaxy. Admiral Taijin Kim broadcast a single message to the planet below. It repeated continuously on every frequency. Surrender your government and military leadership for trial. You have 30 days. For every day you refuse, we reduce your deadline by 1 day and your supply deliveries by 10%. Choose wisely. The siege began. Human ships maintained their positions with mechanical precision. Valtex vessels attempted to break through the blockade 3 times in the first week. Each attempt was repelled with minimal losses on the human side. After the third failure, the Valtex defenders stopped trying. Inside the blockade, conditions deteriorated rapidly. Valtex Prime was a throne world designed for ceremony and politics rather than self-sufficiency. They imported 80% of their food from agricultural worlds. They imported fuel for their power plants. They imported medical supplies. All of that stopped the moment the blockade began. The Valtex government broadcast messages to the galaxy, pleading for intervention. They called the blockade inhumane. They accused humans of starving civilians. They demanded the council take action. But their messages could not escape the human blockade. Only the signals that humans allowed to pass got through, and those were carefully selected to show the galaxy exactly what was happening. The Galactic Council assembled an intervention fleet. High Commander Thelvos of the Crystalline Concordat led 400 ships from 8 different council races. They justified the action as humanitarian intervention to prevent civilian casualties. The fleet approached the human blockade at the edge of the Valtex. Prime System, Admiral Taijin Kim's face, appeared on every ship's communication screen. His expression was tired but determined. Behind him, crew members worked at their stations with focused efficiency. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of absolute certainty. High Commander Thelvos, you are interfering in a legitimate military operation against a regime that committed genocide against human civilians. If you attempt to run this blockade, I will treat your fleet as hostile forces supporting the Valtex Dominion. My tactical officers estimate that 70% of your ships will be destroyed in the initial engagement. The survivors will be disabled or destroyed shortly after. You can also turn around and go home. The choice is yours, but you have 10 minutes to decide. Thelvos consulted with his government. The debate lasted 6 minutes. In the end, the intervention fleet withdrew. The crews had not signed up to die for the Valtex. Most of them privately agreed that the Valtex had brought this situation on themselves. They returned to Council space, and the blockade continued. 17 days into the siege, riots began on Valtex Prime. Civilians stormed government buildings, demanding that their leaders surrender to stop the suffering. The military tried to maintain order, but they were running out of fuel for their vehicles and power for their weapons. Social order was collapsing. On day 17, the Valtex military staged a coup. They arrested the civilian government, including the Prime Minister and the entire cabinet. They arrested the military leadership who had ordered attacks on human colonies. They broadcast a message directly to Admiral Taijin Kim. Admiral Kim, the new Valtex provisional government accepts all human demands. We surrender unconditionally. We will hand over all individuals responsible for attacks on civilian populations. We will pay reparations as specified. We will cede all territorial claims to regions disputed with humanity. We will accept human occupation forces to maintain order during the transition. Please allow humanitarian supplies to reach our civilian population. The war ended on day 93 after the initial attack on New Sol. It was faster than any major conflict in Council history. More importantly, it had been won not through genocide or mass destruction, but through calculated application of force. Humanity had demonstrated that they could wage total war while still maintaining ethical boundaries. Human. Marines landed on Valtex Prime. They came not as conquerors, but as peacekeepers. Commander Eugene Song led the occupation force. Her orders were clear: secure weapons stockpiles, prevent revenge attacks. and begin delivering humanitarian aid immediately. The galaxy watched as human soldiers, who had been blockading the planet days before, now distributed food and medical supplies to the Vaultec civilians. It was a strange image. The same humans who had fought so ruthlessly were now helping their former enemies survive. A Vaultec civilian asked Commander Song why humans would help them after everything the Vaultecs had done. She replied simply, "We were at war with your government and military, not with you. The war is over now. We do not hate you. We just needed to stop your leaders from hurting anyone else." It was a concept that the galaxy was beginning to understand, but still found difficult to process. Humans could turn their capacity for violence on and off based on need. They did not fight because they enjoyed it. They fought because sometimes fighting was necessary to protect innocent people. The question everyone was now asking was what humanity would do next. 3 months after the end of the war, Ambassador Minho Park stood before the reconvened Galactic Council. He carried with him a document that represented 6 weeks of intensive work by humanity's finest legal scholars, military strategists, and diplomats. The proposal for galactic reformation was 200 pages, long, and addressed every weakness that had allowed the conflict to happen in the first place. He presented the core elements calmly and methodically. Military limitations for aggressive powers, requiring defensive doctrines and transparency in fleet deployments. Mandatory arbitration procedures for territorial disputes, removing the ability of powerful races to simply ignore weaker ones. Explicit protections for civilian populations during conflicts, with automatic sanctions against anyone who violated them. Creation of a neutral peacekeeping force drawn from multiple species to respond to threats. The final element of the proposal surprised everyone. Humanity offered to share its military technology with council races for collective defense. Not the weapons themselves, but the underlying principles and doctrines. Humans would help train other species in modern warfare, not to make the galaxy more violent, but to ensure that no single aggressor could dominate through fear. The council chamber was silent as Minho finished his presentation. Council Speaker Thalenverse light pulsed in complex patterns that indicated deep consideration. Finally, the speaker addressed the chamber. "Ambassador Park, your proposals are comprehensive and well considered, but I must ask the question that concerns many council members. Humanity has demonstrated overwhelming military superiority. You have defeated one of our most powerful member races in less than 3 months. Why do you not simply demand compliance with your wishes? Why offer cooperation instead of domination?" Minho smiled slightly. "Because domination through force is not sustainable. It requires constant application of violence to maintain control. Cooperation based on mutual interest is self-sustaining. We do not want to rule the galaxy, Speaker Thalenver. We want to live in a galaxy where the rules actually mean something, where justice is available to all species regardless of their military strength. We cannot achieve that through conquest. We can only achieve it through building better systems together." While the council debated the proposals, historian Sun Wuhan published his complete analysis of humanity. The document spread rapidly across the galactic information networks, translated into hundreds of languages. It became required reading in universities, military academies, and government offices throughout known space. The analysis provided context that helped non-humans understand what they had witnessed. Sun Wu explained that humans were simultaneously the most cooperative and most competitive species in the galaxy. They formed alliances easily, sharing knowledge and resources freely. But they would fight with total commitment when those alliances were threatened. They were capable of extreme violence, but bound by self-imposed ethical limitations that prevented them from becoming monsters. He illustrated the point with specific examples from the recent war. Humans had destroyed Vaultec's military forces ruthlessly, but had never targeted civilians. They had used siege tactics that caused suffering, but had not used weapons of mass destruction that would have ended the war faster. They had hunted war criminals, but had given them trials instead of summary execution. Every action demonstrated the balance between capability and restraint. The report identified the core truth about humanity: they were not the strongest species, nor the smartest, nor the most technologically advanced. They were the most adaptable. They took Council energy weapons and miniaturized them beyond what Council engineers thought possible. They studied Vaultek's battle doctrine and created effective counters in just 70 years. They maintained galaxy-wide diplomacy, while simultaneously preparing for a war they hoped would never come on Earth. President Yoon Choi gave an address that would be remembered for generations. The speech lasted 20 minutes and was broadcast across human space and throughout the Council. She spoke about war, peace, and the hard lessons humanity had learned over 10,000 years of fighting itself. We came to the stars carrying the scars of our own history. Every human culture has stories of war. Every human language has words for concepts like honor, sacrifice, oaths, and justice that emerged from thousands of years of conflict. We studied war not because we loved it, but because we needed to survive it. We created rules for warfare not to make war acceptable, but to make it survivable when it could not be avoided. She paused, letting the translation systems catch up. We hoped when we joined the Galactic Council that we would find species who had learned these lessons without paying the cost we paid. Instead, we found a council that knew peace only because no one dared to break it. That is not real peace. That is just the temporary absence of war, maintained through fear and imbalance of power. Her expression softened slightly. We fought the Vaulteks not because we wanted glory or territory or revenge. We fought because 20,000 of our people were murdered, and the galaxy's response was to tell us it was our own fault for being weak. We fought because if we did not stand up for ourselves, we would spend eternity as victims waiting for protection that would never come. We fought because sometimes the only way to achieve peace is to demonstrate that you are capable of war, but choose not to use that capability unless absolutely necessary. The speech resonated across the galaxy. Several council races, particularly smaller ones, who had felt bullied by dominant powers for centuries, began reaching out to humanity for defense pacts. The Insectoid Hive Confederation proposed a technology exchange program. Even the Ethereal Collective, which had initially been humanity's harshest critics, opened diplomatic channels to discuss. Mutual security interests? Perhaps the most significant change came from the Vaulteks themselves? War Chief Grathix, now serving as a military advisor to the Provisional Vaulteks government, made a public statement that was broadcast throughout the former Dominion. He stood before cameras without armor, his scales showing scars from the war. My people, I led us into this war believing we were strong and humans were weak. I was wrong about what strength means. Strength is not the biggest weapons or the most ships. Strength is the will to use force only when necessary, and the wisdom to know when that moment arrives. Humans defeated us because they prepared for war while hoping for peace. We threatened war while being unprepared to face an enemy who actually knew how to fight. He looked directly into the camera. If we are wise, we will learn from this. Humans did not destroy our civilization when they could have. They defeated our military and then helped our civilians survive. They gave our leaders trials instead of executions. They showed us that it is possible to be both powerful and merciful. That is the lesson we must carry forward. The Galactic Council voted to accept humanity's proposals with modifications and additions, suggested by various member races. The new charter took effect 6 months after the end of the war. Humanity was granted a permanent seat on the Security Council with veto power over military actions. Several species requested that human military advisors be assigned to their defense forces. Captain Yoonji Lee found herself teaching tactical doctrines to officers from the Crystalline Concordat. She discovered that alien species brought different perspectives to military problems. Combining human experience with alien insights produced solutions neither could have developed alone. Warfare was becoming less about any single species dominating and more about collaborative defense against potential threats. Commander Yejeon Song led humanitarian missions to developing worlds. The Council had a policy of limiting technology transfer to primitive species, ostensibly to protect them, but actually to maintain control. Humans began helping these species advance on their own terms, sharing knowledge instead of restricting it. The approach was controversial but effective. Engineer Daeon Cho, worked with scientists from a dozen species on joint research projects. He found that humanity's trial-and-error approach to engineering complemented the more theoretical approaches of elder races. Together, they achieved breakthroughs that neither could have managed independently. Technology development accelerated across the galaxy. 1 year after the war ended, historian Sun Wuhan published an addendum to his original analysis. He had spent the year studying how the galaxy was changing in response to humanity's presence. His conclusion was both simple and profound. Humanity did not teach the galaxy how to wage war. Most species already knew that instinctively, even if they had not practiced it for millennia. Humanity taught the galaxy 3 lessons that prove far more valuable than any military doctrine. First, the credible threat of force is the foundation of lasting peace. Not because violence is good, but because potential aggressors must believe that their actions will have consequences. The Council maintained peace through hoping no one would disturb it. Humanity proved that peace must be actively defended. Second, the purpose of military power is not conquest, but the protection of civilization itself. Humans could have used their military superiority to demand territory, resources, or political control. Instead, they used it to establish rule. Lest that protect everyone, including their former enemies. Power exercised with restraint is more effective than power exercised without limits. Third, and most importantly, a species that has survived 10,000 years of warfare with themselves has learned not only how to fight, but what is worth fighting for. Humans did not fight for pride or glory or dominance. They fought for justice for their dead civilians, and for the principle that strength should protect the weak rather than exploit them. Sun Wu's final paragraph became one of the most quoted statements in galactic history. We now understand that humans are not the strongest species, nor the eldest, nor the wisest. But they may be the species the galaxy needed. The one willing to bear the burden of enforcing peace because they know better than anyone the true cost of war. They came to the stars carrying weapons, but they came seeking not conquest, but community. They demonstrated violence because we gave them no choice, but they showed us that violence need not define a civilization's character. They are the species that turned 10,000 years of warfare into 10,000 years of lessons about why warfare should be the last resort, not the first response. On the reconstructed colony of New Sol, survivors planted a memorial garden. 20,000 trees, one for each life lost in the Voltex attack. The garden became a pilgrimage site for species from across the galaxy. They came to understand what the trees represented. Not just lives lost, but the moment when the galaxy learned that justice must be more than words on paper. Admiral Taijin Kim, now retired, often visited the garden. On this particular day, a group of young Valtex were there as part of a cultural exchange program. They walked among the trees with human guides who taught them the names of those who had died and the stories of their lives. One young Valtex approached the Admiral and asked a question in halting but clear human language. "Admiral Kim, sir! Why do humans not hate us? We killed your people. We used biological weapons on your colonies. But now you help us learn and grow. Why?" The Admiral looked at the young Valtex, whose scales were still soft with youth. He smiled gently. "Because you are not your government's crimes. You are the future. And we fought so that the future could be better for everyone, not just for humans. We fought so that species like yours could grow up in a galaxy where might does not make right, where justice is available to all, and where the strong protect the weak instead of preying on them." He gestured to the trees around them. These trees remember the dead, but they also represent hope. Hope that their sacrifice meant something. Hope that we can build a galaxy where such sacrifices become unnecessary. You are part of that hope. Every species is part of it. That is why we do not hate you. Hate would dishonor what these people died for. The young Valtex stood silently, processing the words. Finally, they bowed in the formal Valtex gesture of respect and understanding. The Admiral returned the gesture. Around them, the garden continued to grow, adding new life to soil enriched by memory and watered by the Ute. Determination to make those memories mean something. The galaxy had panicked when humanity declared war. They expected destruction, chaos, and the collapse of galactic order. Instead, they received a lesson in what power truly meant when wielded by those who understood both its necessity and its limits. Humanity had shown them that the capacity for violence, when combined with the wisdom to use it only when absolutely necessary, could be the foundation for lasting peace rather than its antithesis, the galaxy had realized. Perhaps too late to prevent the war, but soon enough to learn from it that humans were not conquerors. They were not destroyers. They were builders who happened to be very good at removing obstacles when those obstacles threatened innocent lives. They were the species that had learned to carry both the sword and the shield, knowing when to use each and having the courage to put both down when neither was needed. In the end, that was the true nature of humanity. Not warriors seeking glory, not conquerors seeking power. Just people who had survived long enough to learn that peace is not given freely, but must be built carefully, defended vigorously, and shared generously. The galaxy was still learning that lesson. But now, at least, they had teachers who had paid the tuition cost over 10,000 years of hard experience. And in that teaching, humanity found its place among the stars, not as rulers, not as servants, but as partners in building something better than what had come before.